Welcome to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. We're applying the mind of Christ to the matters of the day so that you can connect the eternal with the everyday and get ready to head out into the world that God so loves in ways that honor Jesus. So let's get started. This is The Reconnect.
Inspiring you to bring God back into the conversation of the day.
This is The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge on Faith Radio.
If we're gonna fly, we fly like eagles, arms held wide. If we're gonna fear, we fear no evil. We will rise. By your power we will go. By your spirit we are bold. If we're gonna stand, we stand as giants. If we're gonna walk, we walk as lions.
I want to sing a little Victory in Jesus. That would be my that would be my sports page roundup, like Victory in Jesus. I'm Carmen LaBerge, listening to Hour 2 of The Reconnect. We're going to turn to the sports page as we seek to bring the mind of Christ to bear on all that's going on in the world. And so over the weekend, so much happening on the sports scene right now. The New York Knicks, also known as the Knickerbockers. There's a little tidbit for you that you may not have known. The New York Knickerbockers, also known as the Knicks, they are the NBA champs. They beat the Spurs 94-90 in Game 5 on Saturday night. Let's see. And then, if you read the headline news on Sunday morning out of New York, the cops basically said, and then all hell broke loose. So anytime hell makes it into the headlines, you know me, I'm going to be like, let's pull that forward. Let's talk about that. What does it look like for all hell to break loose on the streets of New York following the victory of the Knicks over the Spurs? So 63 people were arrested as, quote, celebrations turned riotous. A teenager was shot. School buses that had been transporting World Cup fans were torched. So why do people do that? Why can't you? This is why we can't have nice things. Well, what provokes a group of people who are celebrating the victory of their team over another team? Why do they do that? Probably spend a lot of time talking about that. Maybe that's a good topic for Nick Pitts tomorrow. He's a good thinker on those kinds of things. Meanwhile, over on the ice, the Stanley Cup has also been awarded. The Carolina Hurricanes stormed past the Vegas Golden Knights in a 3-0 victory yesterday, hoisting their first Stanley Cup since 2006. I initially read that as hosting their first Stanley Cup, and then I was like, but they apparently won it in 2006, so it's the first one in 20 years. Let's see what else is going on. Oh, yes, Team USA won their first game in the FIFA World Cup. Yesterday was Flag Day. The president turned 80, so happy birthday, Mr. President. And there was the first ever UFC cage fight at the White House. I'm going to just go ahead and tell you, I just hope it was the first and last. I just hope it never happens again. Yes, about some 4,000 spectators gathered on the South Lawn, but tens of thousands of others gathered on the Ellipse. This was a privately funded $60 million temporary arena called the Claw. It was a carded cage fight, which means certain people were invited to participate. What is going on here? I don't mind telling you, this is the devolution of the American culture. What drives us toward this kind of emotionally hyped, bloodthirsty? I know my bias is showing. I think you could make real parallels to what took place in the Roman Colosseum, although UFC fans would be quick to point out, all of the differences. It's not a fight to the actual death. They've got to have health checks. There's all kinds of, referees involved. I'm just going to say that since the days of the Tower of Babel, we've been looking for ways to define our people over and against some other people, and then ways to fight each other. And yes, you could call it competitive sport, but when you're talking about these high contact combative spectator sports, you're talking about something primal in an animalistic way. This is not the best of the human spirit. This is not growing up in every way into Christ, who is the head. I mean, I didn't just ask you, would Jesus sit and watch that? Would Jesus sit and watch one image bearer of the living God do what they do in cage fighting to each other? Just ask yourself that. And then if you are a person in Christ and you are watching it and Jesus wouldn't be watching it, why are you watching that? So I don't mind telling you, I personally find the entire enterprise degrading and dehumanizing. I am certain, I am absolutely certain, like you are not going to be able to come up with some reason where you're going to say, oh no, that was the absolute best way I could have spent my time. And that was the best way that the President of the United States could have spent his birthday. And that is the best way that hundreds of millions of dollars could have been invested yesterday. Yes, the text line is open. If you want to try to make an argument, you want to make a different case, text line's open. 877-933-2484. For me, I'm going to take my victory in Jesus, who was wounded for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was laid the penalty that is due us all. I don't need to watch two people try to beat themselves to death. So, what did you watch over the weekend? Did you watch the UFC, quote, Freedom 250 card at the White House? Maybe you watched the Knicks beat the Spurs. Maybe you watched the Stanley Cup finals. Maybe you watched Team USA or some other FIFA World Cup game. Maybe you watched the NCAA Men's College World Series or Major League Baseball or Little League Baseball. Maybe you were watching golf or tennis or NASCAR or Formula One racing. There was a lot of, quote, competitive sport to watch this weekend. And then, of course, there was the option of going to the movies. What did you watch this weekend? Jim and I went to see Disclosure Day. No spoilers. I'm not going to spoil the movie for you if you haven't seen it yet, but I am going to discuss it. So whether you've seen it or not, the conversation is worth preparing for. First of all, something called Disclosure Day is obviously about the revelation of a truth. And so you don't even have to go any further than that as a Christian. What do you know as the revelation of the truth? Right? You could engage in a conversation about Disclosure Day in terms of how God has disclosed himself and everything that is necessary for salvation. So, do you consider the prospect of alien life as a threat to scriptural authority? Or do you find it like an awe-inspiring confirmation of God's limitless reign? And if you've not yet thought about it, today's the day to start thinking about it. Derrick Warfel is going to join us next. His book and ultimately his documentary, UFOs and God. That's up next here on The Reconnect. What do you know about God? And therefore, what do you know about the universe and everything in it? UFOs and God, revealing deception and truth behind the supernatural invisible war, is a forthcoming book and ultimately a movie. The author is Derrick Warfel. He joins us now. Derrick, welcome to The Reconnect.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I just realized something's not right with my sound here. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you great. Thank you so much.
Good,
So
good.
you are a filmmaker, like, right?
Yeah.
So you've got the printed word. You've got the stories that engage us in this generation. We've got what's happening on the big and the small screen. There's a lot of power in seeing it. Talk with us just about the phenomenon maybe that we're dealing with in terms of the Spielberg release of the film Disclosure Day, but then also all of this research that you've been doing on UFOs and God.
Yeah, no, I see that your show is very heavily geared towards Christians. And so I like that because I'm a believer. I've been one a long time. And that's what got me involved in this. I mean, back in the 1980s, I just thought this was just all bunk. But as I started studying the whole issue of UFOs and abductions and things like that, I just realized there are far too many, how can I say, credible witnesses and events to just write it off. And I didn't have a place for that in my Christian beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked up a book by John Ankerberg, which was excellent. And I just, as soon as I read it, I go, of course, this answers everything. I mean, these are the same spiritual beings that have been around ever since the Garden of Eden, who have been designing to tempt us and deceive us and take us away from God. This thing with UFOs and what can I say, flying saucers is just the latest coat of paint on an old deception. The deception that's been around from the ancient Near Eastern gods to the ancient Egyptian gods to the Arabic jinn to the demons in Jesus' day to the poltergeists and ghosts. Everything supernatural designed to distract us. And the fact that they're coming in UFOs or they're doing these abductions is just another trick that they've been doing for years. And the thing about the film that a friend of mine, as a director, said is very dangerous is it implies that there's no danger with these beings. I mean, if they are in fact demonic, there's a great amount of danger to these beings, and they're just trying to deceive us. It's interesting that even Jacques Vallée, who's a secular investigator of this, probably one of the most prominent ones, has said they're trying to engineer a belief that they're from another galaxy. He says, but no, they're from another dimension. And that's what we as Christians believe. They're spiritual beings from another dimension that God created a whole angelic realm, and some of them turned against God and rebelled against him. And ever since, they have been fighting against God. But since they can't attack God directly, they attack us. And the film UFO Disclosure Day implies that these beings present no problem or no harm to us, which is just a flat out lie.
So we're going to attempt to not have a lot of spoilers in our conversation, but I will say if you've not seen Disclosure Day and you're planning to, it's possible that we're going to say something in this conversation that is a bit of a spoiler. However, if you've watched or listened to Steven Spielberg's interview on CBS, or if you've read anything that's already out there, you probably, I mean, if you've watched the trailer, then you know that there are statements that are made that are expressly religious in nature. You already know that the film is designed to provoke people of faith. I mean, that all of that is in there. One of the main characters in the movie, and this is in the trailer, declare like people have a right to know the truth. Well, that is absolutely yes and amen. People do have a right to know the truth, but what is truth? There's a declaration at the end of the film, you are not alone. This is also true. And so, Derrick, as I was considering this, like I was thinking about like back to the X-Files, the declaration that the truth is out there, right? So people are seeking truth, but there's also then this wide open door for deception. But I feel like
Yeah.
there's an invitation in all of this for Christians. Like we know the truth. Like we can press in.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, there's a line, Ancient Aliens has been on for 20 years now. It's a TV series on History Channel. And every week they almost say, we're not alone. We've never been alone. And I agree 100%, but they're not the beings you think they are. And there's good reasons why. You look at what they do. In the film UFOs, in the film Disclosure Day, it seems the only people who are getting hurt in this are the aliens themselves, that human beings
Mm.
supposedly at one point in 1973 tortured aliens. However, our film and my documentary, my book, basically documents dozens of cases where, in fact, the exact opposite is true. That people who are taken and abducted, or people who see these UFOs, have lasting physical effects. And if they're really friendly, friendly angels, that's not what happens with God's holy angels. It's what happens with the fallen evil angels. And
Hmm.
so the bottom line is, and the film basically, there's one line in the film where they say, they repeat it several times, is don't be afraid of what you don't know. Now, is that a good idea for any part of life? If you go to a car dealership and you don't know the dealer, you don't know the salesman, you don't know the car, you shouldn't be the least bit concerned about what you don't know. Just accept whatever they say. Is that what you say? Or the same
Mm.
thing with aliens. Don't be afraid of what you don't know. You don't know who they are, where they're from, what they want, what they're doing, what their past is, but don't be afraid. I mean, you should always be concerned when you're going into a situation where you don't know what's going on. And you can see there's how can I say, there's so many things in this film. If I had an hour, I could go into that. You just see that they're dangerous, and I think that they kind of whitewash it. That's if I could ask Steven Spielberg a question, I would ask him, "Have you ever met one of these beings when you were a child?"
No,
Uh,
he says he says in that CBS interview that he says something like, I mean, I feel like the aliens should come talk to me because I'm their like I'm a great friend or an advocate or something like that. But then he says, but I've never had an encounter.
okay, well, maybe I've heard
He's opened the
indirectly.
door. He like has a wide open door. I
I've heard indirectly that, supposedly he had a childhood friend. Of course, that doesn't mean he met an alien, but the whole thing with ET, it just feels
Mm,
like, in our film, there's a lady who's we interview, and she said when she was young, she was abducted. And she's outside her house, she's walking, and there's someone holding her hand. And the being holding her hand says, "I'm your sister." And she looks up and it's this gray alien. She says, "No, you're not my sister." And it says, "Yes, I am your sister." Because a lot of these quote unquote abduction accounts seem to happen to the most vulnerable when a child is young. And even in the film, you have this little girl lying in bed and
mm,
she's singing, "Someday my prince will come." Okay. It's kind of odd. And who comes? The aliens. I mean, it's like they're not the prince. I mean, to awaken her to a new life. There's just a lot of things in the film that are very dangerous. And why, as a Christian, I should say this. Why do I say that? Well, from people who have had contact with these beings telepathically or whatever, this is what they teach. They teach that God is not a personal being, it's just a God force. And if it's just a God force, he can't be sinned against. And if he can't be sinned against, there's no judgment day. And therefore, there's no need for a savior like Jesus. He's just an ascended guru. So the process in life is just reincarnation. It's not forgiveness of sins and eternal life. I mean, this is what they teach. And I documented in the book quotes from people who've had contact, quotes from UFO cults, what they believe. I mean, this is totally anti-Christian. And Christians need to be aware of this. And that's why I wrote the book, because I'm afraid that all this really clever publicity is going to make them think, oh, this is cool. These guys have spacecrafts we don't have. They can travel at 10 to 20 times faster than we can with our best jets. They must have a technology that's 1,000 years advanced from ours. Why do we need these old tales of Jesus 2,000 years ago? These guys are current. These guys are the future. I mean, to me, this is just a huge deception.
hmm We're going to continue our conversation with Derrick Warfel here in just a moment. He's the author of UFOs and God. It's also a forthcoming documentary. We're happy to send you the direct link on the text line, 877-933-2484. Yeah, the word deception is big. So we're just gonna continue to plumb the depths of this in just a moment. You're listening to the Reconnect. Hey, I really like it that you listen whenever you want, wherever you are, at all times of the day and night. That is so cool. So thank you so very much for all the ways in which you support this ministry with your prayers and words of encouragement. Right now, in order for this podcast to be available everywhere all the time for everyone, I actually need your help. Could you support this podcast right now so that more people in more places at every hour of every day could hear about Jesus and grow in their relationship with him? Click the link in the show notes or give now at myfaithradio.com. And thank you so much again for listening to this podcast. What is an empath? And when a person is described as an empath, what does that mean? One of the main characters, well, actually, I suppose both of the main characters in Disclosure Day are described as empaths. And if you ask AI, are these people possessed of some kind of alien spirit? AI is going to tell you, no, they're not possessed. They are serving as conduits. They have been implanted with latent cognitive talent by, quote, benevolent gray aliens. Yeah. So it sure looks like possession when you're watching the film. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that might be a bit of a spoiler. We are talking with author, theologian, filmmaker Derrick Warfel about his book and forthcoming documentary, UFOs and God. And we are, as a part of that conversation, absolutely looking at Disclosure Day, Steven Spielberg's new, I don't know if it's a blockbuster or not. 7 million people went over the weekend. I don't know if that makes it a blockbuster. So I will say, by my own experience, it's not worth spending your money on to see it on the big screen. There's nothing big screen about it. Derrick may say it's not worth spending your money on at all.
Well, anything, from Hollywood, and I've been involved in it for 40 years, you've got to be a little bit suspicious of. They're coming from a different worldview than we as Christians are. If in fact these aliens are truly empathetic, then why do the people who they've contacted lose their families, lose their finances, lose their jobs, lose their sanity? Don't take my word for it. Pick up a book by Jim Sparks, who has been abducted probably more than anyone else and is recognized in the UFO community. And you can see his life is just, or Whitley Strieber, or I forget the guy's name who was abducted and gone for 5 days. I mean, they're not, to a certain extent, they fall into, what can I say, Stockholm syndrome, where they, even though they're abused, they somehow are less things. But even people who've seen UFOs, and I give examples of this, have headaches, fevers, nosebleed, palpitations, nightmares, brain problems, perceived loss of memory, intense fear, nausea, vomiting, disorientation. If these are empaths, boy, they're not very empathetic. But of course, in the film, they can make this leading lady very empathetic, because that's what you do in films. You don't want your lead hero to be unsympathetic. But the point is, that's exactly the opposite of what these beings do. And so to say that, it's like the guards in the Nazi concentration camp telling the inmates there, says, this is the solution. Work makes you free. Well, that's crazy. And certainly the lady in the film, I mean, there's characters in the film say, I'm doing this and I don't know why.
Yeah.
Or she says, I'm a passenger.
No,
I
that's
don't
right.
know.
There's clear language in the film that, I mean, if I were, as you said, like if I had a whole hour to talk about this, like I would absolutely plumb the conversation or the depths of spiritual possession, astral projection. Like there's all kinds of stuff going on in this movie that we as Christians ought to be able to point to and say, this is not aligned with the way that God has revealed in Jesus Christ that the universe works according to his will. There is something going on here for sure. And we have a lot of examples of it in the Bible if we're willing to look. And so that's one of the things I really appreciate about what you've done. You are telling us, yeah, go ahead.
Let me give you just two very quick examples. I don't have much time, of who these beings are. People who want to communicate with them, there's two ways they can communicate. One is transcendental meditation, which is basically an offshoot of Hinduism. And the other is people who have used Ouija boards. Does that tell you who these beings are? The second example is people will say, once you've been abducted or been possessed or been a carrier, you can't make it stop. You don't have the will to make it stop. But you know what? There's people who said they have made it stop. And you know what makes it stop? Calling on Jesus' name. I mean, does that tell you who this is? There's one guy who was being raised off his bed and he just didn't want to be involved in this anymore. And he said, Jesus, save me. And immediately he was dropped back on his bed. I mean, does
Mhm.
that tell you who these beings are?
Well, and that's for me, the worst moment in the film. And I don't want to spoil that moment for folks, but there's a moment in the film where it looks like a character's reliance on Jesus is not sufficient
Oh, yeah.
to
Yeah,
guard
absolutely.
her against um,
Yep,
the efforts
abs
of the enemy. So I just think there's so many. We're going to need to have you back. I hope you're going to be willing to come back,
yeah.
because once more people have seen the film, then it won't be like we're spoiling some of those things. But let's work on that list. Let's work on, here are the things that, as a believer, you ought to be able to point to and lift up in conversation, because most pastors are not going to be talking about this, and so we as Christians need to be. We
Well,
we just yeah, go ahead.
just one thing on closing is Apostle Paul says, if we, even us, or an angel presents you another gospel, let him be accursed.
Mm.
That's the one test that we have that something is wrong. And Jesus gives the other test. You'll know them by their fruits, and their fruits are terrible. So those are two tests that tell you who these beings are.
That's good. The gospel test and the fruit test. I love that. Derrick Warfel, thank you so much for being with us today on the Reconnect. I hope you'll come back. The book and the documentary, UFOs and God, Revealing Deception and Truth Behind the Supernatural Invisible War. We'll send you a direct link on the text line 877-933-2484. Next up, we're going to talk with Denise Schick, Help for Families. The book is Grace and Truth, Navigating Faith-Based LGBT Conversations with Youth. This is, for the culture, Pride Month. So how do you, as a Christian, respond to that? And how do you help parents and others of LGBTQ identified kids? How do you help them approach and handle the topic? That's up next here on The Reconnect. Maybe you have noticed it is so-called Pride Month. My husband and I were shopping at Michael's the other day, and he is like, "What is all of this?" And I said, "Well, Jim, it's Pride Month." And he's like, "At the craft store?" Yeah, everywhere. So Denise Schick is here with us. Help for Families is the ministry. Help, the number 4, families.org. Denise is here with her book, Grace and Truth, Navigating Faith-Based LGBT Conversations with Youth. Denise, welcome back to the Reconnect.
Hey, good morning. It's great to be back with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. How do you respond to it's, quote unquote Pride Month? Like, how you are engaged with families who are navigating this all the time, and I suspect that during this month, like, all of that is just pressed to the fore.
It is. It's a reminder for the family members of, in a sense, the group that their loved ones are identifying and embracing as, in a sense, part of their family or their family, because they've dismissed their true biological or adoptive parents, the family within.
So, Denise, this is personal for you. Maybe for folks who are listening for the first time or have missed a prior conversation that we have had, folks who know you know that your father went through a gender transition during your childhood. And so that personal trauma definitely shapes your engagement on this topic, your passion for it, your understanding of the distinct difference between loving a person and affirming an ideology. So maybe we should start there. Let's talk about how we love a person without affirming an ideology.
Yeah, the one of the things that really bother me, Cameron, is that when others will say, "Well, all you have to do is love them." The comment, I realize people, they mean well, but in a sense, as far as being family members hearing that, it can feel like an insult because we never stop loving our loved ones. If anything, we love them more at a deeper level because we understand the deception that they are living and believing in. So when it comes to loving others that identify as LGBT, it's like, okay, the real love, just like God's love, right? It's always there. It's just if the person wants to receive it. But we continue to seek out a relationship when that's available for family
Mm-hmm.
members or, even those in the church. We continue to, invite them to picnics, depending on different situations. We send them birthday cards. It's just continuing in a relationship when that is available to the family members. It's basically where we're not pointing our finger, we're not judging them, saying you're going to go to hell and using that type of a heart. I think that it's very important that we remember the heart of Jesus, and that was to always show love and respect and dignity to each and every human being. We understand that they don't agree with our godly perception, our godly faith that we have. And so we pray for them. If we want to show love for somebody, they can't stop us for praying for them. And that's the honest truth. I'm thinking back to a Pride, June Pride month. Just a couple years ago, I was seeing a chiropractor. And this specific chiropractor worked wonders with my hands. I do a lot of typing and I have arthritis in the hands. And with his help, he did make me well. But one visit that I showed up at the parking lot to only discover that he had the LGBT flag. And I was like, what's up with that? And so he and I had a heart-to-heart conversation. Specifically, I'd asked him, I said, isn't everybody welcomed everywhere? That's one of the things. You are welcome here. I had seen an ad for sports yesterday that said this sport is for everyone. Well, of course, so sometimes it's the language, the message that's being sent that if you're gay, then this sport isn't for you, or if you're gay, then your family isn't for you. But in that conversation with that chiropractor, I had shared with him, this is a reminder of the life that my dad and so many others with their family member of what they're enduring, what they're going through. And I honestly shared with him some of the things that I had experienced through LGBT activism.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at me and he said, well, I never really thought about that. The conversation went pretty in depth with him. Now, I didn't change his mind, and obviously he didn't change my mind. He said, well, isn't there some way we could meet in the middle? And I said, no, there really isn't. And sadly, I ended up leaving the chiropractor just because of their push even more so with this issue. But I understand that he had a family member that was hurt by others. And so isn't it funny how we all react out of our hurt? And who's the bad person, who's the good person?
Mm.
That's kind of a long way to say that it can be difficult for family members. They're grieving, or they're just hearing the news and they're in the shock. And the reminders everywhere, just like you said with Michael's craft
Yeah.
store. I haven't been in our craft store this month, so I've not seen that. But I remember last year with PetSmart. And I'm like, what do pets have to do with
Right.
LGBT issues? So it is all around us, no matter
Yeah.
where you live.
No, absolutely. I was had occasion to be out of town recently, and on that Sunday we went to church, and during the worship service we were invited to a reception, which is, that's lovely, like invite the guests to a reception. And when you arrive, you realize it's being hosted by the part of their congregation that is excited about Pride Month. But now you're there, you're in the room, like and so just saying, like, it is all around us. It is it is impossible, I think, in the culture to avoid. And so I appreciate that you equip us for it and you equip us to be engaged. If you're listening right now, we're talking with Denise Schick. The book is Grace and Truth: Navigating Faith-Based LGBT Conversations with Youth. And let me tell you that the book is designed for conversation. These are real life scenarios that our kids find themselves in, our young people find themselves in, we find ourselves in. And it is, these are real life scenarios and then real discussion questions. And so, Denise, maybe let's just start where the book starts. Let's just start with one person's story, and then the discussion questions that that are here for us, because I think that the discussion questions are they're worth their weight in gold. Like, just having the right questions to ask is so powerful.
Yeah, this specific navigating this specific book, this age group, was difficult for me, honestly. I love doing the children's books, and adult books come very easily, but when we're talking about our young people today and the language and how do we meet them where they are, and yet to keep their attention, to have these conversations with the stories, with stories such as Kathy Grace. By bringing in real life situations. Here's a person that struggled with gender in this way, with sexuality. In between, interweaving the questions, the follow-up questions for somebody to begin the conversation. It also gives the conclusion of why did Kathy Grace struggle in this way, and what were the conclusions that she came to. I honestly think that this book is probably my favorite one. And I've been so excited about it because this is a great book that, even though it was originally designed for Christian schools that were contacting us asking for resources, but this is a resource that a youth group leader can very easily use with his youth group, or mom and dad at home, and have these honest discussions with their children to give the facts and the truth, instead of waiting for them to hear the message from others in school or some other organization where they begin to question.
I think that the honesty about this this individual and others like them, who they have these very real questions about their identity and who they are. And so the discussion questions, if you're just listening right now, the discussion questions for this very first conversation are, do you ever feel as if you can't be the person that you think you really are? And that, in our culture, would be all kinds of imposter syndrome conversation. How do you handle those feelings? Like, there's really good questions in here that are self-reflective first, and I think that's super helpful. And then how would you answer the question, quote, you can be anything you want to be? Is that true? Or are there limitations on what we can become? I think every single one of us knows that, there are things that we cannot become, and having an honest conversation about that. And then, do you or any of your friends struggle with the gender issues that, Kathy Grace did? Kathy Grace is the person in view here. How do you interact with those friends? Have you told anybody about your struggles? And what was their response? So getting the conversation going is really what this book is about. Grace and Truth, Navigating Faith-Based LGBT Conversations with Youth. We'll continue our conversation with Denise Schick in just a moment. We'd love to send you the links on the text line for the book and helpforfamilies.org. That's the number 4 in the middle of that. Help, the number 4, families.org. We'll send you the links on the text line, 877-933-2484. You're listening to The Reconnect.
Psst, have you heard the news? Listening just got better with the new and improved Faith Radio app. No more restrictions, no more static, no more missing your favorite shows. Now, listen when you want, where you want, and share with everyone. When you need hope, encouragement, Jesus, it's right there on your phone. Text the word app to 877-933-2484 and follow the link or search Faith Radio Network in your app store.
What kinds of questions are emerging in the conversations that you're having in your Sunday school class with your neighbors and friends and even colleagues at work, as we have a greater awareness that our kids, our grandkids, the kids of our friends are identifying as LGBT and Q. Denise Schick is here with us. There is help for families. Help, the number 4, families.org. Denise, I think that we should talk about like living in the messy middle. Um, we're talking about long-term discipleship. We're not talking about quick arguments or, fixing people.
Mhm.
Talk about the way that you would like to maybe see churches restructure ministries, youth ministries included, to support families that are walking through genuine identity and gender confusion with their young people.
One of the main changes that where I think churches can be a game changer is obviously to address these issues, but let's start addressing them before they're being faced with their 12 and 13-year-old students that are now identifying as LGBT. We can come alongside of the family by offering that support ahead of time. When a child's 11 years old, 10, 11 years old is not too young. It was when we were children, but not in today's world. How can you start discussing this and to learn different ways, help the parents to know how important it is for them to affirm their child as male and female. They can encourage the parents in a marriage retreat or even on a sermon some Sunday on marriage and the importance of respecting each other. That might sound simple to those of us that do respect our spouses, but it is amazing at how children, young people interpret their parents' marriage and then enters into a personal vow. I don't want to be like mom, or I don't want to be like dad. So it leaves a gap. But for churches to really step up on the importance of marriage, affirmation of their children, how their children watch them to see what is a man, what is a godly man, what does it mean to be a woman, what does it mean to be a godly woman, and to have youth material that will help these children to begin to cement their identity and that their identity is actually found in Christ before Satan taps open that door and cracks it even wider. This book is done in such a non-judgmental way, a loving way. Now, somebody that's of the LGBT may totally disagree with me because it is not affirming of them. But in the language it's used, the way that it is formatted, there is nothing in there that is hateful in any way. We want to come alongside of the youth that might be in those churches that are starting to grapple with this. They're uncertain, or maybe they're in the middle of it. And so it's just continuing to realize this isn't a one-time thing. You have to invest in the relationships of the children, the family, and to be there for them. If the adults come to the pastor and say, this is what we're struggling with, to be able to say, I want to thank you for your honesty, and I realize how difficult this has been for you, to validate the situation that they're in, the worries. If anybody has never ran into this issue, if you can imagine what this would be like when your world comes crashing down. You want people compassionately to come alongside and support you. And as a pastor to say, we want to support you in whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And we can do that as churches to have support groups that even if you're not under an umbrella of somebody, you can certainly offer biblical studies. You and I've talked before, and we definitely have some good resources there to begin that. They just need other parents that are going through this, that will support one another through their stories, through their difficulties, and through prayer and discipleship with one another.
Yeah, I don't think that we could touch on the compassion point often enough here. The empathy and compassion point. Gender dysphoria is real. The journey is real and really hard. Parents are in pain. Grandparents are in pain. The siblings of individuals who are LGBTQ. I mean, the pain.
Even the wives, right?
It's just
the
everywhere.
spouses.
The pain is
Yes.
everywhere. It's just everywhere. So thank you for being a voice of compassion in the midst of this, for your own lived experience, for bringing your experience forward in psychology and addiction counseling and all of it. So thank you for what you're doing at helpforfamilies.org. Denise, as always, thank you for your willingness to come and talk with us. Thank you for really the labor of love that this particular book is. It's called Grace and Truth, Navigating Faith-Based LGBT Conversations with Youth. It's really designed for youth ministries, I would say, but anybody could pick it up and use it. So if you are, if this is an area of interest for you, you'd like to just get started in the conversation, you'd like to learn how to ask better questions, you'd like to work through this on your own or with a group, this is a great resource for doing that. It's a really easy entry point for the conversation. If you've ever wondered, like, what would be a good starter book on this topic? Well, this is a good starter book. Grace and Truth, Navigating Faith-Based LGBT Conversations with Youth. We'll send you the direct link on the text line, as well as a link to helpforfamilies.org. That's the number 4 in the middle, help4families.org. Denise, thank you for being with us again today on the Reconnect.
Thank you.
Friends, if you like I do, if you have real friends in real life who have a child who is now a young adult, who identifies as the gender that is not the gender of their body, like, these are real conversations that real Christians are not having, and we need to be having. We've got to be loving each other, talking compassionately with one another. Yes, absolutely, holding to the truth and not wavering from it. But as we walk in that truth with people who are in real pain, like, we gotta be people of compassion in the midst of that. And so there is help for your family if this is the journey that you are walking. And then for those of us who are walking with families, there's help for us too. And so we're all impacted by transgenderism. We just are. You may not know it, but you're impacted by it. And so this is an invitation into that conversation. As we conclude our time together here on the Reconnect, I just recognize you only get to spend your time once. It's the one non-renewable resource you and I each get to spend each day. So thank you for spending some of your very valuable time with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together. I hope you have as well. Your feedback is always welcome. Text line's always open, 877-933-2484. We talked at the outset of our time together, a couple hours ago now, about the passage in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 4:13. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God. Everything is naked and exposed before his eyes. He is the one to whom we are all accountable. And in that, I just tried to remind you that that's not a threat. It's a promise. God's got his eye on you. God's keeping an eye on you today. God sees you and God loves you. The blessing is an affirmation of that. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Not piecemeal peace, but the real peace, the peace of Christ that surpasses all understanding. Go out there and be a peacemaker and a sower of peace today. Have a great day, and God bless. Thanks for listening to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. Let us know how we can help you more fully reconnect the eternal with the everyday. We want to walk with you throughout your journey of discipleship, so let's connect. You can text us at 877-933-2484 or connect with us online at myfaithradio.com and on all our social media. I look forward to connecting with you as we each seek to reconnect the eternal with the everyday.